Welcome back, all you folks out there in YouTube land. This is the 10th in a series of videos titled Reason and Beyond, in which we are exploring various ideas, various themes of life, always from the spiritual perspective. And these ideas and themes are written about quite extensively, actually, in my latest book, which is also titled Reason and Beyond. The publication date for that is spring of 2019. So I just get that little plug in here at the beginning. But thank you for joining us, and for those of you who are interested in dates or for future historical reference, YouTube kind of, I guess, history. These videos have all been recorded in June of 2018. And right now we're about middle of June, 2/3 of the way through. Having a nice hot day out there in the southwest. I hope the weather's a little cooler where you are. You could fry an egg on the sidewalk 10 o'clock at night here if you wanted to. I wouldn't do it, but you could. But the hot weather's kind of nice. It kind of makes you relax and not take things too seriously. So anyway, speaking of taking things seriously, the topic for today is the D word, death. Now that is not a real popular topic. I'll bet most of you out there have not had a whole lot of conversation on this topic of death, because it is something that generally we human beings avoid talking about because we don't want to think about it. And I do write about death actually quite a bit in my latest book. And it's an important topic to think about, not because there's any reason to be afraid of it. I mean, that is the reason as human beings we don't talk about it, because we are afraid of it, which is kind of interesting. I think many people, even if they don't quite believe it, think that death is the end. It's extinction. It's a descent. I mean, death has been described as that dark night. It's been described as the great abyss. It has been described as, again, extinction, or just like a light blinking out. But actually, none of that is true. You see, none of that is true, because death of the body is one thing, but spiritual continuity of what you really are is something else. And what you are is being. We can call that spirit. You are consciousness. Okay, you are a sense of I am, I exist, I am aware. And you are love, of course, you are peace. And that spiritual reality that you are has never been captured or imprisoned inside a body, although in the conventional human consciousness it does seem that way. And that's one of the things that spiritual life is about. Spiritual life, the authentic spiritual life, is about awakening to the truth of what you are right here, right now, even though you appear to be in a bodily association. And as your consciousness wakes up and begins to expand, you begin to realize, first of all, that you are not just a body. Then you realize you are not a body at all. Eventually you realize you're not even in a body. When you reach that place in higher consciousness, you realize you actually exist somewhere beyond the body in what I call the spiritual dimension, and you find that your mind extends in all directions, and it is unbounded. And that is the way the spiritual self, the Christ, is described in the teachings of India, actually in Buddhism, also in A Course in Miracles, which is the main teaching I have worked with. Those of you that have heard other videos know that I often refer to A Course in Miracles, which is a profound teaching. In fact, I'm going to say a few things about death from the Course, because I think the Course expresses it really well. First of all, the Course says that death is just an idea in your mind, which it is. Excuse me. And again, because fundamentally you are not a body, right? The body is, it's a part of what you experience as yourself. That's true. It's a temporary sort of thing. But what the body is, actually, it's a mask across the face of Christ, across the face of the spiritual reality that you are. That's all it is. Once you become aware of that, okay, then the body can become not simply what you experience life through in this world. The body becomes the instrument through which you both learn about what you are, who you are, and the instrument through which you can teach and demonstrate to others who and what they truly are. So the body is actually very useful. I'm not trying to excuse me, I'm going to drink a sip of water here. I'm not trying to completely disrespect or downplay the importance of the body. It has a role, right? Because we are here. My teacher used to describe it as we are in a bodily association, and that's a nice way to put it. We are in an association with a body, and for a set period of time for each sort of bodily existence, each cycle, let's say, of our existence on what is called often the wheel of birth, life, death, and rebirth. That's what they call it in the East. And for that period of time when we are in physical embodiment within the time-space continuum, the time-space parameters, the body is a useful instrument, and it can be used. If we understand its function, we understand that my body is a wholly neutral thing, that it doesn't have to be any kind of a problem if I can understand and use it rightly. Okay. Now let's again go back to this whole thing called death. The experience of death is, for human beings, the experience of the cessation of life, of consciousness, in and through a body. That's basically all it is. If you frame this experience called death in that greater frame of life of which you're a part, remember, what you really are existed before the birth of this body and will exist afterwards. If you frame death in that context, what the death of the body is simply a falling away of the consciousness of being in time-space, or this particular continuum, in this world. It's really no more than that, no more, no less. Now, however, like everything else in this life, everything in this life, what we are experiencing is mediated and is determined, and its impact is determined by what we believe, right? And by our emotional attachment to our beliefs, our emotional reactions. Our emotions are a kind of thought too. They're part of that same process. So getting back to death, now for the human mind that is identified with the body, death seems a terribly frightening thing. And I have been with people who are descending towards that moment. I have been with people who are dying. And it can be very, very frightening for people who don't have a kind of understanding or a consciousness that lets them both understand and experience that they are more than just a body. Okay, so this is actually another good reason to devote your life to the spiritual process. Okay, because the more conscious you are, the more your consciousness, let's say, approaches the wholeness, the completeness of what it is, of what you are. In other words, a spiritual awareness which transcends, which goes beyond the body, then the more, let's say, the easier, the less frightening this whole process of dropping the body is. Now there was an Indian teacher from India, an Advaita teacher, Advaita Vedanta, which is also called non-dualism, who described that process, I thought, really well. He said, when you know you are the self, right? That's with a capital S, the spiritual self. He says, when death comes, you watch the body fall away. It's almost like a tree watching a leaf fall off of it. So it's not a big thing. But again, this requires a real development of our consciousness, right? A real deepening of our consciousness. That is what's required. Now, death itself, in quite a number of ways, actually, it's something we can remember to help us give our life a sense of urgency and also a sense of purpose. Now, in the conventional human consciousness, what we tend to do is we live in denial of death. Because very often, even if we supposedly have a belief that our existence continues after death, how deep a belief just as a concept, it's helpful, but it's not worth that much. Okay? Belief needs to deepen into insight, into a real intuition, and hopefully into real experience of your existence beyond the bodily limitations, so that you know what you are. But of course, the closer you can get to that, the better off you are. But for the conventional worldly mind, who tends, as worldly human beings, or even as human beings maybe who don't have a deep feeling or sense or appreciation or understanding of what death is, the thought of death is frightening, because it seems to be, even if we're kind of trying not to think about it, it is the end of our journey here. It is the end of all our hopes and dreams and all our goals. It makes a mockery. I think there's a place in my latest book where I talk about that. Death, from that human perspective, makes a mockery of our ego and our pretensions and all the things we think we are and all the things we think we're accomplishing in our legacy. Death actually makes a mockery of all of that from that human perspective. But if you look at it from a little different, it doesn't actually make a mockery of what we do or how we do it. What it does is it provides a kind of backdrop, a kind of reminder of how important life is, of how we have to make the most of it, and of how important love is, how important it is to learn what we are, to be what we are, and to help our brothers and sisters as well in every way that we can, including to realize, to turn their life perhaps in that direction, so they too, those who have not yet started, can begin to make that spiritual journey, which is real important. Life is spiritual, whether you want to believe it or not. Even this bodily existence, let's say I was to think I'm just a body, I'm just a smart monkey with clothes on, which is what the theory of materialism, very prevalent belief system at this time, tells you are. Even if you think that and believe in that, that is simply not true. Your bodily existence and your human mind, the mind that seems to be limited to this head, to this body, lives, exists, is alive by virtue of the essence, the core of what you are, which is the spiritual, the soul, the self, Christ, whatever you want to call it, the Buddha nature. So, no matter how you are living in this life, no matter what you think about it, you are always dependent upon, you are arising from your consciousness, from the spiritual dimension. So you might as well deal with it, right? Get over any of your resistance to it and figure out, well, maybe I should, or start thinking, maybe I should try and get in touch with what I really am. And it is specifically, let's say, that attempt, that orientation that gives life purpose and meaning. So much of our other activities are just to kind of fill our time and keep God away, keep the thought of death away. And that's from my perspective, it's an error, and it's a terrible loss, and you don't want to do that. We have been born in quite a fortunate time, and making these videos here in the good old U.S. of A. We have basically a pretty good life, most of us. We have food and a roof over our head. We have an opportunity to make the most of this life, to find the purpose and meaning that is inherent in life, that is not something I just invent. Again, that's part of the illusion of the human mind, of the ego mind. I give mind I give my life its purpose. And I mean, you can do that, that's true, but that doesn't mean its purpose has any meaning. Okay. So I'm kind of wandering all over the place here. I was starting to talk about death, but that takes you into a lot of different areas. So let me again talk about death in another sense, another spiritual sense. On the spiritual path, what is required, what the spiritual journey is really about, is about the undoing of your mind. Now again, this teaching, A Course in Miracles, makes that real clear. Spiritual life is not a doing, it's an undoing. And what we must undo are all those false ideas and beliefs in our mind and that state of consciousness that obstructs us from experiencing the truth of what we are. All right? Now what that means is we have to become aware of what obstructs us. We have to recognize, see, this is where we generally work with the teaching, often with a teacher, and this takes place over time. This spiritual life, spiritual process is not something that happens in a day or a week or a year. It requires a real commitment. This takes place over time. And what you find is that things begin to, as you progress and you begin to recognize what's important, what's useful and what's not, old habits, beliefs, even friendships, relationships, begin to fall away from you. So this process of spiritual life, especially as you really progress and begin to move into what I call higher consciousness, there is a kind of dying associated with it. You begin to die to the old. Now, spiritual life is even in religious life, they often talk about being reborn. And that part of that process of being reborn is letting go, you could say, a dying to the old. So if you look at it that way, you can think of death, dying, letting things go in a very positive sense. And ultimately what happens then, of course, at the end of any particular human life cycle is that we let go of the body and everything that we knew and we were carrying in that association. And that just falls away from us as we move through this process called death. So let's see, I'm wondering if I should talk any more about this. I just remembered a couple more things I would like to mention, which I think these are ideas that may be helpful to you. And I remember using them before in the talk I gave, but people really liked them, and I think they found them helpful. First of all, the tendency is to think, and the experience is, of course, in the conventional human consciousness, is that your mind is in your body. But it's actually the other way around. Your body is in your mind. Okay? Because mind is more fundamentally and most fundamentally, along with being, what you are. And the body is a thought form sort of image. Okay? That we could say is projected and then from the mind, and then we identify with it. And again, there's metaphysical paradigm here, theology that tries to explain it and goes in a lot of different directions. I'm not going to go there. I'm just trying to very simply describe the process. But your body is in your mind. And for those of you who are engaged in a serious, let's say, spiritual discipline, spiritual life, I'm sure you have the experience at times in meditation, or maybe at other times, and you will, of course, as you move into higher consciousness, you will feel very clearly that your mind transcends, it extends beyond the body, and that the body is actually simply appearing in it. I like to think of the body as sort of a lens, almost, through which the mind focuses its perceptual capabilities, and it's also, again, the body is the vehicle. That's what it's often called, the vehicle through which we experience the physical world. And again, it is the vehicle through which we communicate. At least much of our communication, doesn't it, goes through the body, through words, gestures, through our interactions with people. Again, that's one of the things that makes the body useful. In fact, in the Course of Miracles, the point is made, if we give the body that higher purpose, the Holy Spirit's purpose, and in the highest sense, the purpose of the body is as a communications device, a teaching aid and a learning aid. Through my adventures with the body, my relationships, my life, right, through this bodily existence within the parameters of time-space, I both can learn the truth about myself and others, and as well I can demonstrate by the way I live, by the way I treat others, by my vibration, my radiation to others, what they are, what we are. See, teaching in its most fundamental sense is simply demonstration, and from that perspective, again, we are all always teaching each other who we think we are and what the other person is to us. So the body is both a learning aid through which I learn who and what I am, and I learn how to treat others with love and respect. I learn how to be with other people, how to treat life in general. And it's a teaching aid. I can both communicate, depending where I am, who I am, and my perspective and what my assignment is, what I'm guided to do. I can both communicate truth, I can communicate love, I can express love verbally or in active ways, or I can just simply through my actions, through my attitudes, I can be communicating as well. So when the body is given that purpose, just to be a communications device, a teaching aid and a learning aid, and I don't misuse it. See, my body is a wholly neutral thing. I give the body its purpose. And if I can reframe that purpose and adopt the purpose given me, say by spirit, by the higher intelligence, then the body has all the health and strength it needs. It doesn't need to get sick. And it will last just as long as we need it. And then when we are done with it, we can lay it aside, because now if we've finished this life, we've finished our assignment, we've finished what we needed to do, and we have discovered the truth about ourselves. We have moved into a direct consciousness of what we are and a direct experience of the love that we are. And then when I am done with, let's say, demonstrating that, teaching that, sharing that, now we no longer need the body, no longer has a purpose, no longer has a function. And we can just take it off and lay it aside, like that earlier quote, that earlier expression I used, that was used by the Advaita Master, Nisargadatta Maharaj. We can just take the body off and lay it aside like a suit of clothes, not because it's old, or sick, or dying, but because I no longer need it. Now, the very advanced minds, that's what they tend to do. In fact, in the Indian traditions and the yogic traditions, that's what the advanced yogis do. They call it a conscious exit from the body. Not that many of us, can carry that off, but it's within the realm of possibility for all of us. And certainly there are people, certainly here in the West, and maybe even people who they meet death bravely and they relax and they don't resist it, and their consciousness moves beyond it, and they just see the body fall away. So again, gone full circle back here to this experience of death. It does not need to be a frightening, terrible thing. It does not need to be. It is because we don't understand it and because we have misidentified with the temporary vehicle that is the body. If we can frame life in that bigger sense and actually attain the consciousness that is of that larger sense, the truth of what we are, then this experience of what we call death, of leaving it aside, is quite a different thing. I'm just going to make one more point. The body and the world rise together. You see, that's why when you lay the body down, this world disappears and you find yourself in another dimension. So the body and the world are actually one thing. The whole subject-object nexus, which is what we call duality or polarity, actually arises in our experience as one movement. We don't come into consciousness as a body unless there's a world, right? And we wouldn't experience a world unless we were experiencing it through a body. So I don't know, maybe this is a point I think it may be helpful, so I'm just, rambling a little bit here. So I think this is all that I need to I think this is all that I need to say on this subject for today. And let me just say, this is going to be the last video for a while. This is video number 10. And again, this is June of 2018. Maybe later this summer, in the autumn, I may do some more. And let me mention again, the Course in Miracles, a profound teaching that I work with. Those of you out there are familiar with it or maybe interested in it, look it up. You may find it a useful teaching. And then there are 2 books that I was given to scribe and that are linked with the Course, called From the Christ Mind, Book 1 and Book 2. And these books are meant to be a later day supplement. They are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. The Course is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, probably just about any bookstore you go into, because the Course in Miracles is worked with by hundreds of thousands of people, have been translated into 10 or 12 languages. Profound teaching. Many of these ideas that I've shared with you today have come from the Course. And these true ideas, I try always in these videos to use ideas that are actually true. What I mean by a true idea is an idea that you can have a direct experience of. It points at a reality that you can experience directly. Okay. So anyway, I think that's enough for me for today. And thank you so much for joining me once again. All of you, thank you. And I hope you're having a wonderful day, a wonderful week, a wonderful month. Have a wonderful summer. It's going to be an eventful summer. Keep your eyes and ears open. I think a lot of things are going to be happening. God bless you. God bless us, everyone. Thank you again. And bye-bye for now.